Hi, this is Emerald and welcome to the Diamond Net, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to integrate the anima. So today's video is all about anima integration, so before we get going with the video, I wanted to give you a quick definition of what the anima is first. So Jung defined the anima as the inner woman in every man. It is the man's feminine side that resides in the unconscious that he can develop a relationship to. And through this relationship to the anima, he can become more whole as a person and access the unconscious mind. And so there's this element of bringing together these two opposites of the personality and allowing this exaltation to happen from there, an exaltation of the personality. Now, my personal experiences with the anima differ in some ways because I have had issues with the anima myself as a woman. And so the way that I define the anima more generally is that it is the feminine side of every person. So every person has a feminine and a masculine side regardless of gender. And we can have different types of relationships to either of these sides. And so the feminine side is the anima, and the masculine side is the animus, which I'll do a video on next week. So regardless of gender, this is very, very important information to know in order to have a better relationship to your feminine side. So whenever a person integrates both their masculine and feminine side, there comes to be this integrative relationship that comes about that gives every person the ability to have clarity and discernment within the conscious mind and connection to the unconscious mind. Now, because this video is all about anima integration, we have to also understand anima disintegration as well. And in order to understand disintegration of the anima, we have to understand disintegration of aspects of the personality in general. So we have to have a basic understanding of what the shadow is to understand this. So basically what the shadow is, it is the area of our internal landscape that we put all of the stuff that we don't want to recognize anymore. These are parts of ourselves that we have rejected for one reason or another, maybe because of our worldview or our identity, or because we've experienced some unmet need or trauma. And what happens is that we sort of sweep those aspects under the rug and we forget about them. Now, when it comes to the shadow, what we have to understand is that it's not just these individual traits that end up getting swept into the shadow. It is actually little fragments of our personality that act as their own autonomous little mini personalities. So they have their own wants and their own needs and their own fears and agenda and memories and wisdom. So you can imagine the shadow as being a space where all of these fragmented personalities that are also very much you are kind of hanging out and trying to get their needs met and trying to enact their agendas from the space of the shadow. And so the way that they do that is by manipulating the conscious personality without our awareness of it. Now, the anima is a little bit different than a shadow aspect in the sense that it has a deeper and more archetypal nature. So the anima is basically a conglomerate of all the traits within the feminine principle, all the traits that are informed by the energy of yin. But it can also act in the same way that an unconscious aspect of ourself does, a shadow aspect. And so the anima also has its own agenda and needs and wants and fears. So understanding this about the anima, we get kind of an image of an inner woman that lives in the shadow, that's always trying to be integrated and always trying to get its agenda done in the same way that other shadow aspects try to get their agendas and needs met. Now, when an aspect is repressed or unconscious to us and pushed into the shadow, and this includes the anima, what they're going to do is they're going to try to use a variety of different tactics to bring you back into connection with it. And so what might happen is, let's say that there's a shadow aspect that's operating down in the shadow that you're not aware of. What it might do is it might project itself out onto somebody in reality. You know, somebody who maybe has similar traits or maybe doesn't, but it'll project and kind of like, almost like that person would be a projection screen that could just fully take on the image of that shadow aspect. And what would happen is that we would see that person and go, oh, somehow this person is going to complete me. Somehow I have to get integration with this person. So what it's trying to do is it's trying to entice you to actually integrate with it on the inside by projecting itself out to the external. So when the anima is repressed in varying degrees, what often happens is that the anima is trying to do two things. Number one, it's trying to get the conscious personality to integrate with it and to pay attention to it and to not reject it. And then it's also trying to gain a sense of empowerment over the conscious personality, because whenever an aspect is repressed, there's a feeling of powerlessness there. And so the anima, this is when it becomes vengeful and starts to project quite negative things out into reality and make the person feel really possessed and really overtaken by the anima. So the two main agendas of the anima when it gets rejected by the conscious personality is to, one, gain a sense of empowerment by making the conscious personality feel disempowered. And the second thing is to try to attract and allure the conscious personality to connect with it. And so in order to do this, it uses the mechanism of projection to project the pedestaled woman onto individual women and women as a group. And the pedestaled woman is in complete opposition to how the anima actually feels. So the anima feels, when it is disintegrated, it feels rejected, it feels marginalized, it feels powerless when it is rejected in the conscious personality. And so what it does is it projects this image of power, and basically this kind of sexual allure tends to come with it. Now this is most often the way that it comes up for men, and so I'm going to talk about it in that context, but it can also come up in similar contexts for women as well, as I've experienced personally. But with the image of this powerful, beautiful, pedestaled woman, it's this sense of, here is this woman that is above everything, that is this sacralized woman, and she is somebody that holds power in her hands, and because of that she's quite terrifying. And she specifically holds male power in her hands, the ability to say this guy is worthy and this guy is not. And so this image that the anima cooks up in opposition to its feelings of rejection and powerlessness get projected out onto women as a whole group. And so the more disintegrated somebody is from their anima, the more likely they are to see women in this light of this sacralized, pedestaled woman, and orient to that by idolizing women and seeing them as beyond flawed, and basically succumbing to that sense of powerlessness and, oh my goodness, I'm not worthy of this creature here that's so perfect. Or they might flip over to the other side, as they might become resentful, and they might see the pedestaled woman as a threat to drag her down off of her pedestal, and this sense of always trying to overcome the power of the pedestaled woman. And so with this projection of the anima, it tends to come coupled with both an obsession with women, usually in a sexual way, and also a repulsion toward women, a desire to stay away, a desire to, again, drag the pedestaled woman off of her pedestal. Now with anima disintegration, there tends to be a spectrum. So generally, men who are, let's say, existing in cultures that really, look down upon men for showing their emotions or anything else that falls within the window of the feminine principle, or and if there's been any kind of abuse from like a female caretaker or abuse in a relationship with a woman, what might tend to happen is that there could be a subsequent pushing away of the anima. And so in these cases where that rift becomes more intense, the more intense these symptoms become. And so what might, in, let's say, someone with milder cases, be just kind of a general nervousness around women and, kind of be more in this middling range, it can become this real debilitating sense of powerlessness and a sense of hatred. So there's definitely a spectrum when it comes to anima disintegration and anima possession. And in the most intense dynamics of anima possession, it really feels to that person as though they are fully, basically kept in a cage by this internal woman that they feel is attacking them from the outside, but it's really happening from the inside. And it becomes kind of cyclical. The more that they push away the anima, the more the anima possesses. The more the anima possesses, the more that they project onto women as a whole group these negative things, which creates a dynamic where they push their feminine side away more. And then that cycle repeats and repeats and can become more and more intense. So as you can see, anima disintegration can be a real barrier to personal growth because it doesn't allow you to be empowered. Because the anima feels so disempowered by the rejection, what it's trying to do is it's trying to get you to feel that same sense of disempowerment so that it can feel the sense of empowerment over the conscious personality. And so getting into this kind of lock with the anima and getting into this dynamic can really spiral into something that's quite energy sapping and quite debilitating. So with this in mind, what are some of the benefits of integrating the anima? Well, the first thing is that you wouldn't be dealing with this kind of internal struggle with the anima. Whenever you have integration with the anima, it doesn't have these kind of desires to disempower you because it doesn't itself feel powerless if it is integrated with a conscious personality. So you have this internal harmony that comes from that. And then also with the integration of the feminine side, what you get is more access and more discernment relative to the emotions. You also get more connection to the instincts and personal sovereignty. So your ability to know where your boundaries are and which direction you want to go in really has to do with the anima, because all of that is very emotionally led, and that's really the core of the anima. It also enables you to follow your intuition more and to have more intimacy in friendships and romantic relationships. So oftentimes when I've spoken to men who seem to be on this spectrum of dealing with anima disintegration, one of the main reasons why they end up pushing the anima away is because they're afraid that if they integrate their feminine side, it's going to somehow diminish their masculine side. And because they value their masculine side, they don't want to lose that. And so one thing to be aware of is that whatever is going on internally for you energetically, so in terms of your masculine and feminine side, it just is simply what's there. So you cannot add or take away masculinity, you just have to have what's there. Same thing with the feminine, you cannot add or take away the feminine. So your option is to either become aware or be unaware of it. The more aware you are of it, the more mature the personality becomes, and the more you step into a more exalted and mature version of the self. Otherwise, if you repress it, whether it be the masculine side or the feminine side, you get the opposite. You get a more denigrated expression of the personality and less awareness in general. So if you're having the sense like, oh, I might like to integrate my anima, but I don't want that to sabotage my masculinity, I want you to think of the anima as being the soil that your masculinity can grow in. It gives a grounding to it. And so then it can actually become exalted from a more denigrated expression of masculinity to a more exalted version of masculinity. All right, so I'm going to share with you real quick some steps that you can take toward integrating the anima. And again, this is for men and women, so anybody who wants to integrate their feminine side can use these. All right, so the first thing that you can do is you can kind of examine the things that you associate with femininity and with women and see if you have any resistance, judgments, or aversions to those things. And so wherever you find a resistance or aversion, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find a way to drop resistance to that. And the way that you do that is by examining why the resistance is there in the first place. So let's say that you have a resistance to open emotional expression, which tends to be related to femininity and falls within the feminine principle. So understanding where that might be coming from. So maybe when you were a child, maybe you were shamed for open emotional expression, and so you relate that to those painful experiences of having your emotions invalidated. And so getting down to the core of why you have that resistance in the first place tends to do the unraveling for you. The more that you explore into these resistances, the more you find their root cause, and they tend to just kind of break apart by themselves. The second thing is to figure out why you might fear integrating the feminine side. So for example, with myself, when I was a child, I had internalized the idea that femininity equaled weakness. And there was always this sense that at that point in time, there were people usually underestimating me for a mixture of both my age and my gender. And this always it always bothered me. And so with this, I sort of internalized this idea that, oh, the feminine is the reason why I'm being seen through this lens. And so there was a lot of repression for me back then. And so this is one of the reasons why I had such an issue with anima disintegration before. And it also resulted in kind of a similar dynamic to what I had mentioned of the anima possession earlier on in the video, with a lot of, kind of seeing women in this powerful position in the sense that they could reject me, not necessarily in a romantic way, but more so like just as my humanity, and this sense that they held this kind of power, and there was also this kind of desire to take them out of that power. And so when it came to my fears about integrating the feminine, there was a fear of, number one, that my femininity was going to be a source of disempowerment for me, because I related empowerment to masculinity. And then the second thing was that I didn't want to be associated with the girls that I perceived to have this kind of power over me and have this kind of personality that caused me a lot of pain. Now, of course, everybody has different fears relative to the integration of the feminine, so really being able to examine those particular fears and what you think might happen on the other end of that. So thinking, if I integrate the feminine side, then this thing is going to happen. And what is that thing, and why is that such a negative thing? So if there's a thought that if I integrate the feminine side, then I'm going to be less masculine, then ask, why would that be such a bad thing to be less masculine? It's like, okay, well, then my dating prospects will go down, and, I'll be seen as lower status and all of these kind of things. And then ask, why would that be so bad? And it would be like, okay, well, maybe it'll put me down in low self-esteem or bring me into a space of powerlessness. And so really being able to figure out what the deeper roots of those fears are. Then the next step is finding ways to dispel those fears through learning more about the feminine principle and learning more about the anima. I found that the more that I learned about the feminine principle and just femininity in general, the more that I understood it as a source of empowerment as opposed to a source of disempowerment. And then the fourth step is generally to develop a deeper relationship to the anima. Now, one way to do this is just to get in touch with the emotions in general. A big part of being in touch with the feminine side is to be in touch with the emotions and the personal sovereignty. So a big part of that is through connection with the body, which the body is very much related to the feminine principle. And so being able to take yourself from your mind, which tends to be an aspect of the masculine principle, and bring yourself down into your emotions and into your body, and having that deeper connection on that level. Now, you can also use different methods like active imagination, where you can directly engage an anima figure. So let's say that you have a dream, and there's a woman in the dream that you think is a reflection of the anima. What you can do is you can call that dream image back up, and you can use the image from that dream as a medium for communication with the anima. And so maybe within the dream she was doing a particular thing, and you might ask her, well, why were you doing that? And then you let your imagination supply that up. And so at the end of this video, I'll leave you a link to my video on active imagination and shadow work. And this should be helpful for you in terms of understanding the active imagination process. Anyway, so that's all I have for you for now. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead, click the like button below and subscribe, and leave me a comment down below. Also, I have a free shadow work visualization, and I'll link that below in the description box and in the comment section in case you want to use the visualization. The visualization basically brings you into a space where you can explore the shadow through different symbolic representations of it. So I highly recommend checking that out. Anyway, that's all I have for you for now, and until next time, keep becoming more you.